Welcome to Plastic Model Mojo, a podcast dedicated to scale modeling, as well as the news and events around the hobby, where we hope to be informative and entertaining and help you keep your modeling mojo alive. All right, Dave, we are back for episode 58 for Plastic Model Mojo. We're even enjoying some almost spring-like weather here in central Kentucky.
Telling you what, it's spring has sprung.
No, it hasn't. It'll roll back one more time at least.
Yeah, that's probably true. Hey, as long as we don't get another snowstorm, I'll be happy.
Well, we got a really bad one this week. Several years ago, the week my wife went to New Zealand.
Yep.
In February, it snowed like crazy, like a foot or more.
Yep.
Well, I tell you, it's been busy around my place, probably yours too, but what's going on in Dave's model sphere in the last 2 weeks?
You know, as the spring thaw comes on slowly, reluctantly, my model sphere is slowly thawing out. Progress is being made, not as much as I want, but things are moving along. I'm also starting to get some of my model adjacent stuff moving again. I'm getting more chance to read books, read modeling magazines. There's been a lot of good stuff modeling related on YouTube yet. So it's kind of coming out of that dark time that happens in the winter, and slowly life is returning. Now, you know, once spring hits full time, there will be yard work. There will be a lot of other stuff to distract from modeling. So I intend to make hay while the sun shines, or almost shines. How about you?
Well, I've been giving a lot of thought and trying to change some habits around here and try to get a better balance of my hobby time and the rest of my life outside of my job.
So you've decided to quit your job and you're going to do the hobby full time?
No.
Okay.
I've not decided that.
I'm sure Robin appreciates that.
I'm sure. I hope she does. There's plenty to do around here. And as much as I like coming down here and doing what I do all the time, I'd like to come down here and do it. Still, I don't need to be disappearing down here at like 6 p.m. at night and coming to bed after everybody else has gone to bed. I mean,
yes.
That's just not the way to do it for this house anyway, and probably several other houses out there listening.
Yes. And
then there's this matter, this Plastic Posse podcast wager that we willfully lost.
Yes.
And
well, it's $100 to a good cause. I mean,
it is. And we need to get caught up with Scott, because I guess last weekend he wanted to try to get together and do a segment for his show with us and rub our noses in it, I guess. But multiple swim meets for me and volleyball for you. And
yeah,
we just couldn't get it done. So Scott, we haven't forgotten. Please reach out again, or I will, and we'll work that out.
Yeah, we'll get together and we'll take our beating.
That's right. And swim season, on that note, is coming to an end rapidly. So that one distraction will be less. I'm sure something. Well, no, maybe not. I've got a high school senior though, so there's a lot of stuff going on. But
oh yeah.
Swim team won't be one of it. And he's about got all his college stuff done, so good on him. And maybe we can take a breath after all that. But that's what's been going on in the model sphere outside of the workbench.
Well, good. Since we're sitting here doing the podcast, I'm assuming that you have a modeling fluid within arm's reach.
Less than an arm's reach.
I heard ice.
I do, Dave, and this one's going to be a little unusual. I'm drinking Last Feather Rye Whiskey.
Ooh, a rye.
From Journeyman Distillery in Three Oaks, Michigan.
So how did you come by that?
If you remember this time last year, January last year, we lost a good friend in our little social circle here in Lexington.
Yeah.
And Danny Faulkner, and Danny was a real big advocate and volunteer with Special Olympics of the Bluegrass. I think that's right.
Yeah.
They do a fundraiser every year, Polar Bear Plunge, where they fill up a above ground pool outside one of the local restaurants here in the middle of January. And everybody jumps in who's volunteered to jump in. But anyway, a lot of the extended family from Danny's wife were down here, and Mark, her brother-in-law, another engineer, so we kind of can talk about a lot of stuff. And when he's around, he's been around a lot since Danny passed, which is good for the family. But anyway, he knew I was enjoying bourbons and whiskeys, and he brought me and one of the other fellas in our social group, Russ, each a bottle of this Last Feather rye whiskey.
Ryes to me are interesting. I don't tend to like them as much as bourbons, but I've had some good ones, so I'll be interested when we get to the end here to find out what you think of this one.
Well, what do you got going on?
Well, I've got nothing quite so sophisticated. I have Yuengling Traditional Lager. It's not exactly mass market American beer. I mean, it's mass market, but it's not Bud Light or Miller Light or something like that. Yuengling is it's the oldest continuously operating brewery in the United States, owned by the same family since the beginning. They do a good beer. It's not something that I would want to drink every day. Once you get used to craft beers and the fact that they have more body, Yuengling tends to be a little bit light, kind of like drinking water. So we'll see how it goes when it gets me through the episode, but right. I'll let you know. But yeah, nothing so high end as what you're doing.
Well, I don't know what I've got's high end, but it's certainly nothing I would have probably tried on my own. So I thank Mark for gifting me the bottle, and we'll shake it out at the end, Dave.
All right. Anybody mailing us?
Oh my goodness. I think we've got a record. I think we've got 14.
Oh God. No 3-hour tours. We're going to have to cut through these.
Well, some of them are short and succinct, so it's not going to be so bad. Just one comment before we get into it. I mean, it's one a day since we dropped the last episode.
Yep.
Which ain't bad.
No, not at all.
On average, once a day.
Yep.
Well, let's get into it because it's a lot and we got to get rolling.
You got it.
First up is Michael Maxwell, and he is from somewhere in Canada. Now, he makes reference to a show in Saskatchewan, so I don't know how far you're going to drive for a model show, so I assume he's in a commutable distance to this town in Saskatchewan.
Gotcha.
We'll leave it at that for now till we get to the show. Get to the show part. He's 38, and he kind of modeled with his dad for a while on RC cars, and then he got into Warhammer when he was 13 and kind of dropped the scale stuff. But on a whim, he started watching and build videos on YouTube, like Andy's Hobby Headquarters, which is a recurring reference especially from these folks who are getting back into the hobby. I think Andy's channel has an appeal. Somebody said it while we were in Las Vegas. A very approachable, down-to-earth kind of vibe to his videos, and not so grandiose and quote-unquote expert level kind of stuff necessarily.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right, that he puts out a very approachable product.
Anyway, he was looking for an IPMS chapter or possible events to attend, and it turns out there's an event called BridgeCon a couple of hours away from me, so that answers that question. In Saskatoon, Saskatchewan on May 7th, 2002. Did I say that right? That's the way it's spelled.
I think that's the way it's pronounced.
I'm sure our buddies up in Ottawa will help us out with that.
That's right.
So May 7th, BridgeCon in Saskatchewan. So a couple hours. That's not too bad. That's well inside our radius, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was talking with Jim today about how in the U.S., we think nothing of going 6 or 7 hours for a model contest, whereas places in Europe, 3 hours is considered a long distance.
Well, he's asking about shows in general because he's never been to one. He's got a lot of wargaming painting experience and painting busts and that sort of thing. But he wants to know if is there a happy medium for artistic license versus realism when it comes to judging at scale model contests. He says he's familiar with the gaming world, and he's naturally inclined to incorporate more artistic license in his projects. And he's learning a lot in scale modeling. He thinks he can port over to the gaming world, and he feels like there's some stuff from the gaming side that can come back the other way, which that's a point I might talk on a little bit after this. But I tell you, my experience, it shows typically, you can disagree, Dave, but there's probably a limit to the artistic license approaching, historical accuracy.
Yes.
At most shows. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're building. I think if you're doing figures, I think if you're doing sci-fi, I even think if you're doing automotive, that artistic license is probably more accepted by the judging community, whereas I think that aircraft and armor, you tend to your quote unquote artistic license is limited by the fact that those genres tend to have historical accuracy kind of built into, even if it's unspoken, built into the judging criteria. So like if he goes and he enters Warhammer figures in the fantasy category of the figures, I think they'll be judged exactly as if it was a Warhammer contest. That type of artistic license is accepted. I just don't know that it stretches over much into the real military side.
And I guess it would depend on how you define what your boundary is for artistic license. I mean, a lot of these avant-garde weathering techniques could be considered artistic license, right?
True enough.
But I think you're right. I think, the other categories are kind of historically bound, and some of that painting technique and weathering, what have you, is kind of a next level inside of that. That's kind of, if it's historically accurate in the sense of the markings and the paint scheme, etc. The next level into that is the next circle in is how you rendered the finish on it. And there certainly are some artistic license there, but if you put you put national markings on a tank that it never was owned by, or for whatever, it's just something like that. Then
right.
That's going to be a different animal there. And I think that's going to be considered maybe more of a ding than a plus.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Now he goes on with another topic, and we talked about this with Dr. Miller, Dr. Strangebrush, about, some paint mules kind of thing, cheaper kits to practice on. And he bought several cheap kits, and he picked up a couple. Now he's not so sure he should practice on or not. There are a couple of old 72nd scale biplanes, but they're old Airfix biplanes in the early pre-round logo Airfix boxes.
Mm-hmm.
I think looking at them, they're from maybe the Craftmaster, the North American boxing of those kits. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It says Craftmaster or something down under the title of the subject. He wants to know if he should save them for a collector or build them as intended. And I'd say build them.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that's up to you. I have no idea. I know there are some kits that are very collectible, and particularly certain boxings of certain kits that are. But in general, most model kits, especially mass market model kits, aren't really very collectible. There are certainly collectors who don't build much, and they do want older things from their childhood in the boxings that they remember them. So there's some of that, but in general, with some rare exceptions, I don't think a lot of the mass market models from the 60s, 70s, and 80s are super valuable.
Well, these are certainly from the 60s in the box they're in.
Yeah.
Maybe the early 70s. I'm not completely familiar with Airfix's box variations, but that's a whole collector's kind of thing.
Oh yeah, there's a collector's guide out there that talks all about that.
Well, he should maybe check into that. He may have something that we're not aware of. No, some of those kits Airfix has never reissued are kind of valuable. I don't know if these World War I biplanes are among them. They could be, but I don't think they are.
Yeah.
Probably worth looking at.
Yep. Luckily, there's the internet out there, and you can Google away.
Show announcement from Jeff Keenan. And Jeff's from Buffalo, New York. Insert snow jokes here, he says. He's training for a half marathon and gets lots of, quote, windshield time at work as well. So that's when he's listening to the podcast. He likes building Bandai Star Wars and 72nd scale aircraft, especially helicopters.
Those Bandai Star Wars kits are amazing.
Well, his reason for writing is he wants to plug a show to be held Sunday, 3rd of April of this year. And that would be IPMS Niagara Frontier, which is an old show.
Yes.
That's a long-established show. Now, has it always been on Sunday?
Yeah. This is that thing that you and I have talked about in the area from Cleveland to Buffalo up to Heritage Con. In that area of the world, for some reason, model shows are Sunday, not Saturday. And I have no idea why.
Well, I suspect the population density is such that they don't have a huge number of long-distance commuters.
That may well be the case. That may well be what it is. But it just does seem that shows in that general area tend to run on Sunday rather than Saturday.
If you're in the greater Buffalo area on April 3rd of this year, please check out IPMS Niagara Frontier. Again, that's a long-established show. I mean,
yes.
I've been seeing Niagara Frontier ever since I've been in scale modeling.
Yep, absolutely. And I would love to get up to that show sometime.
And he closes saying getting a new episode notification is like a mini Christmas gift. Well, Jeff, thank you for being a listener.
Thank you. Yes, that's very, very, very kind.
Another Jeff from Fort Worth, Texas, Jeff Kellerman. Oh, he wrote in about the KV versus JS tracks, and he found the answer on the 4BOgreen.com website, which is Neil Stokes' website, author of the Big Red KV book.
Yes.
Couple of track configurations were the same for both vehicles. So,
well, leave it to the Russians. I mean,
recycle, renew, reuse.
Exactly.
I should have thought of that. That's a good point to go check out 4BO Green. Greg Williams from Alexandria, Ohio. Now, is this the guy who wrote in before who joined IPMS at your request?
Maybe. Sadly, I've lost track of the number of people that have done that, but I appreciate all of you who have.
He wants to know if we've seen Plasmo's P51 build, because, we, along with just about all the other podcasts, end up dropping Night Shift several episodes a year.
Yeah.
As a reference.
Yeah.
And he wants to know if we also follow Plasmo. I do.
Oh, yes.
I like Plasmo. I think he does a lot of really cool small scale stuff, 72nd scale. He makes a point that I've said before on this podcast early on, like our first 4 or 5 episodes probably, that he seems fearless to try anything.
Yeah.
And, he's made me nervous watching him with a razor saw sometimes. I'm like, okay, this is where he cuts the top of his thumb off. Do you watch Plasmo much?
Again, small scale, 72nd scale. That is one of the things that attracts me to that channel. I can't say that I've seen every video, but I do watch. In fact, even I go back through old catalog. I've been through a fair piece of Evan's old catalog. I've been through Night Shift's entire old catalog, and Plasmo is definitely one of the ones that is a don't miss it, because you if nothing else, it's like going to a Penn and Teller show. You're waiting for the accident to happen and the blood to start flowing, and then you just hope like Penn and Teller, it's a magic trick.
All right, so next up, Rich Long from Cookeville, Tennessee. Now, he's the one who wrote in last time about having a toddler in the house, and he says the dog with opposable thumbs comment made him laugh. So, well, good, because I think that's a good way to describe it.
You survived. We both survived having toddlers in the house.
I know. 2 each. He brings up my comment about baking the soil before actually using it on your modeling projects. Now, I have to wonder now with a lot of stuff folks are using if this is even necessary, but I've done it in the past. I haven't done it recently because the stuff I've got was done years ago and I've got plenty of it. But again, that's to kill the organics in it, because I've seen it happen. I've seen it in other publications, my railroad publications, where folks have used natural materials, natural earth, soil and stuff, and haven't, sanitized it in this way, I guess is a good way to put it. And
molds develop.
Start developing molds and stuff like that. How long and how hot? I think you need to get it above the boiling point of water.
Yeah.
At a minimum. And I'd say 25, 30 minutes would probably take care of it.
Yeah.
I don't know, to be honest, but I think that's what we did, and my stuff's never caused me a problem, and it's bone dry.
And that's, I think, the key to it is you can do, if your wife will forgive you for using her sheet pan, you can get a lot of it, spread it on a sheet pan, stick it in the oven at 250 for 30 minutes. And in theory, unless you're one of these guys who produces dioramas like some sort of assembly line, that's probably going to last you a whole long while.
It will. And then back to my other point, I think if you paint it all black after you put it down, put a layer of paint over it, it may not be necessary.
But you know what? I'll be honest with you. If I'm using an organic, I think it's worth doing. Even if 99 times out of 100, nothing's going to happen. It's that 1 in 100 shot. That'll be on the model that you consider the best base that you've ever done.
Probably.
That's just the way things work. That's Murphy's Law in action. And whatever you do when you're done with the sheet pan, clean it up. Don't just stick it in the sink.
Go get your own and use it to do your diorama scatter material on, so you don't trash your workbench.
That's true.
Kenneth Loop. And this one's important.
Okay.
It corrects something we said that we weren't sure about last time that a listener had told us. Gators Grip Glue is alive and well.
Oh.
New website, gatorsmodelstudio.com.
Okay, we'll have to put a link on that show notes to that.
Gators Grip is Kenneth's product. So this is right from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
He says he's had some challenges after they lost their home due to Hurricane Laura, but they're making it work again. So there was a disruption. That's what's going on.
Gotcha.
So he is not done making Gators Grip. He just, the man lost his house.
Well, we can understand how that might deprioritize your cottage industry modeling hobby. But I've actually met him at a national. I have several mask and glue things that he's made. So it's good to hear that he is still operating and has a website. So that's good news.
Well, we'll get that posted up, and thanks for writing in, Ken, and helping us correct that. So never assume, as they say.
That's right. And sorry about the house.
No doubt. I can't imagine. Rod Kuntz from Denver, Colorado. Or if he knows JB.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
He wants to know if we either have individual or PMM Instagram accounts. Just a food for thought. It'd be easier to see all the awesome photos of our work and beverages, etc. Now, we do, but we're a couple of old guys.
Yeah, we need to hire some 15-year-old tween to run our Instagram account.
He's right, though. I gotta say, we could do a better job, Dave.
Yes, we could. Well, but you know what? We actually have to finish some stuff in order to post some pictures and make it meaningful. So maybe we can use that as motivation.
We'll try. Stephen Lee, our good friend Stephen Lee from Sprue Pie with Frets, has written in, Dave.
Steve has been doing some fantastic stuff on his blog lately. I'm telling you what.
Well, he says we pondered the question of which old kits stand the test of time, or as good or as better, or of some more recent offerings. He has a nomination.
Okay.
He wants to nominate Italer's 1980s vintage in 1/35th scale SDKFC 234-2, which is the Puma, the 5-centimeter turreted 8-wheeled armored car.
Wouldn't you have some experience with this?
I would have some experience with this. It makes me wonder if I agree with him or not. Yes, you can tune that kit up pretty well. It's a good fitting kit, in my opinion. He says, dragons, they've got theirs. It's usual combination of problematic instructions, meh engineering, and unfriendly plastic, which is a personal objection of Dragon kits. I have to get him to elaborate on that.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to have Stephen on sometime and talk about that, because that's an interesting subject.
Yeah, I don't know, Steve. I've built that kit, and I think the wheels are terrible. Other than that, it's not bad. So I don't know. I also have the Dragon kit. I've never done a side by side comparison. Yeah, it's right. It's got a lot more parts, but do they fit? And they tell you to put them in the right place. I have no idea yet.
It's the classic Dragon instruction. Put it somewhere over there.
That's right. And he's recently discovered the joys of bourbon.
Oh, good.
And he thinks of us every time he is hanging out with his new friend, Basil Hayden.
Oh, Basil Hayden's a good friend to hang out with.
Well, it's a good entry bourbon.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Up next is Zach Peace from sunny Eastern Connecticut. Is that a real place, or is that a joke?
I don't know. It's a great question.
He liked our discussion on repurposing, and he's got a daughter who's 6 now, so he's just come out of the toddler phase. He's got a school-age kid now, which is a big help. And he did what I did. He saved a bunch of baby food containers.
Mm-hmm.
And all the little double-walled and partition things for corralling small parts and decals and all that stuff. So he's exhausted his supply, though. Guess it's time to have another kid there, Zach.
I'm not. Well, yeah, I'm all for that. I think that's great. But as far as a cost-effective way to come up with hobby supplies, may not be the most cost-effective.
May not. You're probably right. And on the modeling fluid front, he's recommending Lot 40 Canadian rye. That's kind of a coincidence. I'm drinking a rye tonight.
Yeah.
But not from Canada. It's from Michigan.
Well, that's close.
Almost Canada.
That's almost Canada.
Oh, we got one from Whitey from the Model Geeks, Hollywood,
All right.
Hollywood, Maryland.
All right.
He's looking forward to Omaha. Seeing us all
straight.
again. So I answered his email and said, yeah, we're looking forward to that too. We reached out we asked them to give us their take, or thought they might offer their take on this kind of front loading the build with doing the ordnance and all the popcorn up front.
Right.
Typically he says he waits to the end or he may work on them while other parts are drying, but that's the way he does it. He does wait to the end more or less.
Okay.
Well, I asked him to have some of the other geeks write in to see what they do. If this is your jam, 48 scale jets, and maybe that works for you.
Yeah.
But yeah. I can see definitely how it would not be for somebody who was ready to be done with it.
And I can tell you from having built a number of 72nd scale jets that by the time if I wait to the end and I don't have pre-done ordnance hanging around in a drawer somewhere, I am usually done with the model, and I either leave the ordnance off or it becomes an afterthought that many times otherwise detracts from the model. So I am a big fan of when you've got 30 minutes and you don't have the ability to do something on one of the projects that you're working on, do some ordnance. Then when you get a bunch of it done, it all gets sprayed the same colors. Spray it, particularly if you happen to have that color in your cup, so that you end up with drawers full of ordnance that you can hang on your aircraft. I think you could do the same thing to some extent with military vehicle stowage. That's
true. You can. Up next, William Chill.
Bill Chill. I like that.
Well, I know. He's written in before. He's an expat, U.S. expat in Borås, Sweden, and he's an IT engineer at Volvo. How about some Volvo swag, Bill?
Or maybe some parts for what is a V70?
I can handle that over here. Could use a T-shirt though.
Yeah. What are you going to do when there are no more of that that platform.
I'll have to move on to the next one, I guess.
Yeah.
Or maybe this will run its course. Well, he just went to the Swedish Nationals in Malmo. Is that right?
Yep.
And while not as big as the U.S. Nats, he had a great time. He says this show rotates between 3 cities: Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmo. Gothenburg is where a lot of Volvos are built, actually. For a country with, he says, a population of 10 million total. That's why it's not as big, obviously.
Yeah.
Had a great time. He says he set a budget of 2,000 Swedish crowns, which is about $225, and spent 5,000 Swedish crowns.
Yes. Good job. That is the way to do it. Set yourself a budget, go to the Nationals, blow right through your budget. One of the things I would love to do is I would love to go to the Nationals in other countries. Obviously, I want to go to Scale Model World. I would love to go to, well, I guess it's the equivalent of a Nationals in Australia. I'd love to go to Sweden. I know Norway has a Nationals every year. And I would love when I hit the big lottery where I no longer am required to be employed. That is definitely one thing I would love to do.
Well, I'm going to jump down to a point he makes that's kind of interesting. It's kind of an overall impression of the judging and what did well and what did not. And he says he's not sure if it's the Nordic taste, but models done in the Spanish school with their virtuosic flair and fancy color modulation did not do very well in the judging. The best of show in the armor category was a modern Norwegian tank with 0 weathering. That's interesting. Now, there are a lot of, well, not a lot. There's only 10 million people in the whole country. Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, and Northern Hemisphere. There's a style out of that area that is it's got a lot of muted, more somber kind of color toning to it.
Yeah.
And I really like it. And I've seen it attributed to possibly being the fact that they are in the Northern Hemisphere and they're, how to say it without
a muted color palette.
Yeah. The muted color palette is kind of an artifact of their interpretation. Well, the way they see the world, the sunlight differences, the long periods of darkness,
right.
Can kind of have that effect. Possibly. And maybe that's the reason for the style difference, but I don't know. It's an interesting point.
Well, and I do think the Spanish school, obviously when it first burst on the scene, it became very, very popular. But then I think that there was a reaction to it as being, okay, now that's just too much, especially as people pressed the Spanish school to and past its logical extremes. And I think there probably was a reaction to that says, now you've gone too far here. That's, you've gone from deeply contrasted to cartoonish. And so I think there's a natural swing back and forth of a pendulum as far as that goes. And I think that the pendulum is swinging back toward more moderate, muted, more, and I don't want to say realistic, but not quite as exaggerated a set of highlights, shadows, and stuff that is what the Spanish school was famous for.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know, but it's an interesting point.
It is.
Up next, also from that part of the world, from Denmark, is Salim Burr, who actually says his dad was Syrian. They moved to Syria for a few years back when Assad Sr. was ruling over that country. And he remembers being in a state of emergency a lot of the times, and a lot of Russian BTR 60s and T-62s parked around the corners of the capital.
Well, I'm glad he's not in Syria right now.
Yeah, and a lot of tired personnel standing in the sun looking like they wanted to be somewhere else.
Amen. Soldiers everywhere.
He's asking a to talk a bit about primers, which is probably a whole segment on its own.
Yep.
Talk to Dr. Miller about that. He says there seems to be a religion on primers, and I'm not going to disagree with that. He's purchased the expensive ones from Tamiya and the cheap ones from the hardware store, and he can't really see the difference. And the fanatics say the cheap one will disrupt the details on the model, but he can't really tell. Maybe it's his bad eyes, he says.
I will tell you, I am a big fan of Mr. Surfacer 1500 Black in the rattle can, which is obviously on the expensive end. I like what it does for me, but am I willing to admit somebody might be able to go to a hardware store and get some gloss black paint out of a rattle can that could do 90% of what Mr. Surfacer does? Yeah, I think that's probably possible. A little bit of it just may be the security blanket for me, knowing that if I use the Mr. Surfacer, I don't have to question whether it's going to work.
True. And I think that my experience is I think like the Tamiya, I use the Tamiya rattle can primer a lot, and it's not cheap.
No.
And I don't get a lot of models out of it. Even at my pace, I don't get much out of it. But I think it's got a finer finish and a finer atomization. I just think it comes out of the can more predictable than a big hardware store rattle can.
Well, and not only that, I think the carrier flashes off better.
It may. I don't know. But I think JB over at the Posse podcast uses rattle can primer quite a bit.
Well, maybe he'll weigh in. We'll get an email from him.
All right. Well, we may need to explore that one a little deeper because there's there's lacquer primers and acrylic primers and all that jazz.
Yep.
Rock Rozak from Detail and Scale. They have a new book, Dave.
Uh-oh.
Hot on the heels of somebody's Tomcat release, I think. Somebody just released a big Tomcat.
Yeah. There have been several Tomcats released.
I meant like in the last couple months.
Last
quarter, maybe.
Yeah, somebody released one in the last quarter, and I can't remember. There were several within the last year and a half, so that there's a all new set of Tomcats in all of the scales.
Well, this is Color and Markings of the F-14 Tomcat Part 3. Prototypes, Test, Evaluation, and Adversary Aircraft. So this is all the unusual schemes you might see on a Tomcat.
See, that one tickles my fancy for the adversary stuff. One of the areas I love are those adversary schemes.
Well, if you're interested in this book, you can go to www.detailandscale.com. There's a print edition for $23.99 and a digital edition for $14.99. If you're into F-14 Tomcats and looking for some unusual liveries, there you go.
I may have to look into that because, again, I'm a librarian who happens to model.
Well, from the email channels, I'm to my last one, Dave. This is Richard Forzon from, he doesn't say where he's from, but it's a quick one. He just recently joined IPMS, and he wants to thank us for encouraging him to do so. So,
thank you. I'm glad you did.
I think your dedicated statue now is going to be carved out of a log with a chainsaw instead of an ice sculpture, Dave.
Well, that's okay. I'll take either. I've got one last one. It came in via our Facebook page, via Facebook Messenger. Ken Freund, who I would not have known how to pronounce his last name other than he said Freund rhymes with joint. So I took my cue from him. He listened to our episode 56 and we broke his wallet because it caused him to pull the trigger on a silhouette cutter. He got a Silhouette Cameo 4, and now he has had previous experience because he was in the graphics industry. So he had experience with the commercial Roland units, but he said those were clearly too big to buy and use for hobby purposes. So he's picked up the Cameo, and I've encouraged him to tell me of his experience because I'm gonna learn from him. And he also says that the 10X 7X is that somebody figured out the formula for 10X, 7X, and it is carried by a company called JM Hobby Supply out of Pulaski, Wisconsin. It's marketed under the name Styrene Tackit 2. That's Styrene, TACK hyphen IT, Roman numeral 2. So considering I like the 10X, now I've got the Flexifile Plastaweld, which I found to be very similar. But if you use 10X and like 10X, the same formula in a different bottle is available from JM Hobby Supply out of Pulaski, Wisconsin. And I appreciate Mr. Freund for supplying that info.
Well, that's the listener mail for this episode, Dave. If folks would like to write into the show, please send your emails to plasticmodelmojo@gmail.com. This has become one of my favorite segments of the show, and it must be for a lot of other people because we just keep getting more and more, and love every one of them. Thanks, guys, for writing in. Keep it coming. Questions, suggestions, let us know.
Absolutely. And you can also send us a message in Facebook Messenger if you use the Facebook platform. So feel free to reach out that way. This is the point in the podcast where I stop and I beg you that when you're done listening to this episode, that you'll go and rate us 5 stars on your podcatcher of choice, whatever podcast app you listen to us. Please rate us there. Also subscribe if you don't subscribe. And finally, please tell a friend. And a lot of you have been doing this because we continue to gain new listeners. And we know that some of them have come from people telling their friends, their modeling friends, about the podcast. And to be honest with you, that is the best way for us to get new listeners. So if you would do that, we would appreciate it.
Also, please check out all the other podcasts out there in the model sphere. We've created a consortium website to aggregate all those to one spot so you can have some quick, easy links. Go to modelpodcast.com. That's plural, modelpodcast.com. And there's links to quite a few of the other podcasts who are participating in this little consortium with us. Also, please check out our blog and YouTube friends out there in the model sphere. We got Mr. Stephen Lee, who we mentioned earlier in the listener mail segment with his Sprue Pie with Frets blog. Chris Wallace, model airplane maker. He's got a blog and a YouTube channel, and he's been pretty prolific on the blog side, especially in the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
Jeff Groves, an inch-high guy, all things 72nd scale. If you like 72nd scale, you need to check out his blog and see what he's up to because he's always got a lot going on. And finally, Jim Bates of Scale Canadian TV. Check out his YouTube channel. And I'm jealous. He got to go to a great show this weekend with some of the Plastic Posse podcast guys. And
yep.
We haven't got to a show yet this year, so we're behind it. We'll get there, though.
Yep, absolutely. Finally, I'd like to ask if you're not a member of your national IPMS organization, that's IPMS USA, IPMS Canada, IPMS Australia, IPMS Norway, IPMS UK, whatever your national organization is, consider joining. Even if you're a member of your local club, consider joining your national organization. They do great work. A lot of it's behind the scenes. All of it is done by volunteers. Nobody's getting paid for doing this. They're giving up their modeling time to try and make the hobby better for the average modeler out there. So a lot of you have emailed in and let us know that you've joined or rejoined. And I want you to know I sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart to all of you who've done that. And if you haven't done it, I'd appreciate it if you would consider joining your national IPMS organization.
All right, Dave, we've covered a lot so far, but let's take a short break here and have a word from our sponsor. Plastic Model Mojo is now brought to you by Model Paint Solutions, your source for Harder Steenbeck airbrushes, David Union power tools, and laboratory-grade mixing, measuring, and storage tools for use with all your model paints, be they acrylic, enamels, or lacquers. Check them out at www.modelpaintsolutions.com. We're back, Dave, and it is Wagons Ho for Omaha.
So how close are we, Mike?
At the time of this recording, Dave, we are 148 days away from the IPMS National Convention in Omaha, Nebraska.
That's going to fly by, man. 148 days is going to go by like nothing.
Especially when the weather warms up.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm getting excited. We're 148 days away. The vendor table forms are up now on the national website. The trophy sponsorship applications or the portal to pay for trophy sponsorships and put in your suggestions for your top 3 to sponsor are available now. There's still the night at the museum, I think, is still being offered. So if you haven't got in on that, you probably want to do that soon.
Yeah, I imagine those. I know they limited the number of attendees. I've got to believe that's going to sell out awfully soon.
Well, I've reserved us a vendor table, but it wasn't shown on the list of vendors, and I've inquired about that. So hopefully we'll get that sorted out.
Yeah, we definitely need to
in the next 24 hours because we certainly want to have our spot in the vendor room.
Yep.
You know, trophy sponsorships, I said it last episode, I'll say it again. If you've got a hobby business, a club, some extra cash, you feel like sponsoring a trophy package, please do. That is a major expense for the show, I would think.
Yes, it is. It is one of the large expenses for the show.
So any help you can get along that is much appreciated. So we sponsored one last year. We're probably going to get on that again.
Yep.
And I got to get in so we get a good one. Got to get a good one that's kind of suitable for our podcast.
There you go.
Well, and I tell you, Dave, just the anticipation is really starting to build because we're getting a lot of can't wait to see you guys.
Yeah.
Kind of emails and messages on the Facebook page and stuff. And it's going to be a good time.
Las Vegas was our first national after starting the podcast, and it really, really turned out well, both the experience in the vendor room, recording interviews, etc., but also the social aspects to it. We had a whole lot of fun with a whole lot of people. Everything from the breakfast with all of the podcasters to the podcast impromptu seminar that we did, to late nights sitting around sipping various caramel colored fluids. And, I've got to think that Omaha is going to be next level.
Well, I hope so. I mean, the Aussies are coming, so
yeah, that's right. We got to start training now if we want to drink the Aussies under the table.
Well, I don't know if we want to do that, but I look forward to meeting those guys face to face and hanging out. And
absolutely.
And I think they're in with the night at the museum too, so that'll be fun.
They are
being there with those guys. So
they are there. I can guarantee that.
So Davey and enjoying, looking forward to it, guys. It's going to be a good time.
Yep. We'll show you some good old Southern hospitality.
Even though we're not in the South.
Well, we are in the South. Omaha isn't in the South.
That's what I meant, Dave.
All right.
Well, Dave, it's time for the Benchtop Halftime Report brought to us by Tackett Z. Tackett Z, the must-have tools for the model maker. Get in on some Tackett Z tools. You can do so at www.tacketz.com. Please check them out.
Yeah, I know Jim just placed an order.
Good job, Jim. I'm sure Ed appreciates it. I need to order some more stuff.
Yeah. I do too, because I've found that I need some more stuff just to be able, especially as you get multiple projects going.
Well, Dave, speaking of multiple projects.
Yes, that's right. In fact, I'm going to nickname my model bench Multiple Projects.
What you got going on this episode?
Okay. I said that the mosquito would be done last episode. It is so close to done. It is right there. Really. Now I'm just dinking around with the gears done, the canopies on. Most of the pencil weathering's been done, although there's a little more of that I want to play with. It's now I am not going to consider this model a huge success. In fact, I have a long blog post that I'm formulating for when it is finally done, and I can take, well, I won't call them beauty shots, but a couple of photographs. But that's basically all I've been working on. I haven't had a huge amount of modeling time the last 2 weeks, but that's about it. And I've got it to the point where I'm close to sticking it in the case.
So is there going to be a link on your blog to get a Just Say No to Group Builds t-shirt?
You know what? I've got to. I really. I'm generally not a tattoo guy, but I swear that I think that I need to have something tattooed on the back of one of my hands that says "Say No to Group Builds." Because that is part of the problem with the experience. Now, I won't blame all of it, but most of the problems with this build were my own idiocy and poor choices. But it certainly didn't help the fact that it was not something that I chose myself to do.
That's right, and we shouldn't dog it too hard. A lot of people enjoy that. And
yes,
maybe
right.
I could too if the equation, if the recipe was right. I might enjoy it too. But usually it's the kiss of death for my productivity.
Yep, absolutely.
But that's me, and it's apparently you as well.
Yep. So other than that, the only thing I've done is a little bit of work on the B-52, just simply because there were times where, again, I didn't have enough time to do a lot. So I was doing, and I felt a little more construction oriented. So I was doing some sanding and stuff on the B-52, but sadly the model bench hasn't shown a huge amount of production for the last 2 weeks. Part of that is also has to do with COVID work, etc. So hopefully all of that is in the rearview mirror, and I'll have something to actually show for it before we broadcast the next episode. So, Mike, what does your bench look like? Or maybe I should ask, what does your computer screen look like?
Well, we got a little bit of both, so let's just start knocking down the list here. I started priming the Mooseroot Cup entry.
All right.
That's interesting because I got to take the whole thing apart. Well, not the whole thing. I got to take all the limbs off and the head off and separate it back into some subs to prime it, because there's so many blind angles on it and movable parts that trying to prime it all together seems like a bad idea to me.
Gotcha.
So painting will be moving forward on that one shortly. Hopefully this weekend I'll start getting some paint on it.
Yeah, because the deadline's coming up.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Let's just rattle can it a solid color and call it done, which I really, really don't want to do, but
yeah,
we'll see what happens.
Done is the important part.
Now, the Zis 2 base has kind of gone stagnant again, kind of catching my breath on that one. I had to get a little courage up to do a few things on that, but now it's time to paint it black. I haven't done that yet.
I was going to ask you if you had actually painted it black yet.
No, and that's not, I think that's going to be not so bad, I think, because of my biggest fear up until this point was getting so much other ground material on the revetment walls that's going to have to repaint them. And I successfully navigated that and didn't get anything on them, really. I got some touch up to do for other reasons where I've rubbed the paint off the corners and stuff, handling it. But I think painting it black's going to go pretty good.
Well, I'll tell you what, from every time I see Night Shift do that, it causes me to audibly intake air. I go, I mean, and it always works out beautiful. And I'm sure yours will come out beautiful. But I can see why you'd stand there with that airbrush and be going, do I really want to do this? And I think you do, but.
Well, I put that really garish Chinese static grass on it that came with the static grass applicator. So now I have to, because
you forced yourself to do it.
It looks like a miniature golf course right now.
It does. Oh, that'd be great. You need a German or a Russian figure with a putter.
A little miniature windmill.
There you go.
It's been a lot of Fusion 360, Dave.
That's what I've heard.
Been a big distraction. Like last weekend when I wasn't at swim meets.
Yeah. And should have been modeling?
It was, oh yeah, I think Sunday I probably was on Fusion for 6-7 hours. Not continuous, but almost.
Yeah.
It's just distracted from other modeling, but it's time well invested for what I got going on, I think. But I've shown the model of the ZIS 6, the truck leaf spring,
right,
on the Facebook page several times. That CAD model's done, and I'm done plenty of test prints at work. I'm extremely pleased with that effort and the way that turned out. That's really going to get the Katusha project off to a quick start once I'm ready to start gluing stuff together on that one. So,
well, the thing is, now that you've modeled it, we got to figure out a way to make it more visible. It's almost a shame to hide it under the vehicle behind the wheels.
Well, the best part of it will be visible, which is the center block and the springs.
Yeah,
you'll be able to see most of that. The hubs, not so much, but that's okay, because I've not been one to try to shy away from the bottom of a model. So if you look up under it from one side, you'll be able to see the backs of the leaf springs on the other side of the vehicle. It's got that going for it, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
In addition to that, though, that's kind of my primer project for Fusion 360 and 3D print.
Yeah.
So I think I've got a success there. Fusion 360, I've kind of figured out some of the quirks and had some help figuring out the quirks along the way. And, it's a good package. The price is right. It's free for hobbyists. I mean, there's really no arguing with that.
Yeah.
And there's some people out there doing some really amazing stuff that I'll probably never do with it. So it's going to be 100% capable of what I'm going to probably do with it, in my entire use of it. I think I figured out how to do everything in Fusion now, just about everything I could do in like CATIA or another enterprise CAD package that I'd used before, outside of, at a job.
Yeah.
So the next step is this Reba Botan, this Hungarian truck I want to do. And I've done some test models, some parts. I've got, got a lot of information I've cataloged on this vehicle, and I've created my master layout to start actually doing real solid modeling for real, and parts I intend to either print or use for masters for vacuforming or whatever. I'll probably take a pause on that for a while and get a couple of these other things done. But I'm kind of excited about that project going forward, because I've bitten off a couple of pretty big chunks just to kind of play around with Fusion 360 and see if I could actually do the modeling. And it turns out I think I can. So the leaf springs was a big confidence boost to go to the next level. And the big thing on the Reba Botan is if I can model the wheels in CAD, the tires and the tire tread and the shape of the profile of the tire, I think I can do the whole thing.
Now, for the ZIS, is there any other part that you're thinking about doing a CAD 3D replacement for?
No, it's just that the rear leaf springs to convert it from a ZIS 5 to a ZIS 6, because those parts were so terrible in the kit.
God, they were. And
they were visible enough that I wanted to replace them. And doing it this way, I get the alignment right the first time, and I don't have to scratch build a leaf spring and find out one wheel's higher off the ground or something after I get it together. It's kind of my motivation for doing it this way. So that's what's been going on my bench. Things have been moving kind of in the ether, in the computer space, I guess, in the CAD world. But it's all tied to a project that I intend on going forward with. So that's my bench.
Well, good. So, Mike, we've been building and we've been making progress on that side. Have you happened to have purchased anything? Did anything break your wallet?
I've been good, but not perfect.
Okay.
I mentioned it last time. I bought some consumables, a primer that I'm using on the Musaru Cup project, and some Mr. Hobby decal solutions. That was the artifact of or fallout from the Dr. Strangebrush episode.
Yeah.
Not real exciting there. We talked about vintage kits in the listener mail segment. Now, I have bought a first issue of Airfix's RAF Rescue launch in 70-second scale.
which is a nice kit.
Yeah. And it's a first issue, so it ought to be, the tool quality in it should be as good as it could be.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that. I think that'll be here tomorrow. In addition to that, I've bought some BM-13 Katyusha rockets from a Russian company called Studio Perfect Models. Now, I ordered those through Armor 35, which is an armor-centric Russian website.
Now, are these resin cast, or
They're resin cast with all the stenciling as decals.
Oh, okay.
So they're really sharp.
Well, good. Was there a lot of stenciling on those rockets?
Not a lot, but it's bigger on the rocket because the rocket's bigger than like a anti-tank round.
Okay.
Like the casing on my Zis 2 rounds has some stenciling on it.
Gotcha.
And this has a little bit more information on it. And I'm looking forward to getting these. And now, they didn't have them at the time of this order. I was a little disappointed, but Studio Perfect has also done some Zis 1 wheels. Now, Zis 1 is not what they go on. It is the actual wheel. That's the wheel designation. Zis gets assigned to a lot of stuff because the Z in Zis is Zavad, which is factory.
Right.
The I is for the Russian word or phrase in the name of,
mm-hmm.
and the S is for Stalin. So Zis means factory in the name of Stalin.
Gotcha.
It's what Zis stands for ultimately. And
yeah.
I'm not even sure that was a factory. There's probably a lot of factories had that title. I would imagine.
If you wanted not to be drug out to the gulags or shot.
Possibly. But they've come out with a set of wire-spoked wheels for like the 45 millimeter anti-tank gun and the 120, the caisson for the 120 millimeter mortar.
Yeah.
I want those too, because they are absolutely gorgeous.
Hopefully they're not being routed through the Ukraine.
Well, I was about to say, I'm worried that, the geopolitical landscape may throw some shade on this idea, but we'll see what happens, man.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
What about you? What broke your wallet, Dave?
Well, I have not been as good. After having multiple weeks where I went to the hobby shop and didn't buy anything and really didn't buy stuff online and was doing pretty good, an orgy of wallet breaking took place. Well, first of all, one of the consumables that I failed to mention and meant to mention on the last episode, I went out, replenished my supply of Q-tips, both regular Q-tips and the pointy ones. And I had run through my supply of both, went ahead and got replacements for them. So I count that toward modeling, even though those are not necessarily modeling items. I then purchased the Flyhawk SBD3 Dauntless, which I ordered off of eBay a number of weeks ago. It arrived.
Hang on. What's your first impressions of that kit?
It is gorgeous.
The Dauntless?
Yes, it is absolutely. It definitely is a great replacement for the old Hasegawa kit. It is an upgrade, and it's worth the money. So definitely, if you have any interest, definitely do it.
Well, the last 70-second scale Dauntless I built, I think, was the tester's boxing of the old Hawk kit. Maybe.
Yeah, and we don't even want to talk about that.
No.
Then I also purchased the Arma F4F4 and the Arma P51BC, courtesy through Mr. Bates, and they are both fantastic. Arma continues to amaze. I don't see how this company hit the ground running without a learning curve that most companies seem to experience.
Well, maybe they had their learning curve with a different model manufacturer.
Maybe. I would love to know the story. If the guys from Arma want to come on and be interviewed, this is your open invitation if you listen, because I would love to talk to you about what you're doing, because what you're doing is fantastic. Finally, the IBG Focke-Wulf 190. They have started releasing these. They are doing all of the D model 190s in all the different versions with all the different sub-variants and variations. The first 2 kits have already been released. That's the early production D9 and then the D15 torpedo bomber. They just announced a double kit of 190 D9s, another boxing, but it's a double kit, which isn't out yet, but should be out soon. Again, the engineer, I can't wait to get my hands on the actual kit. I ordered it off of eBay. It's coming from Poland.
If that kit's any good at all, that ought to be a big hit.
I think that whole series, if it lives up to what I've seen in sprue shots and in CAD and in renders and in early test builds, I cannot imagine that this is not going to be one of the hottest kits of the year.
I'm sure I'll get one eventually. IBG's, their armor kits are good. I mean,
yes,
I like
they
them.
are. Yep.
So,
and their aircraft kits are good too.
Well,
and
so there's high hopes.
And this seems next level good. It seems like these guys have stepped it up a notch, and I will be interested to put my hands on the plastic and see how it goes together.
Is that all you got?
That's it, man. God, if I had any more, I'd be in bankruptcy court.
You could represent yourself.
Mm-hmm. Never a good idea.
Probably not. Well, Dave, it's special segment time, and tonight's special segment is actually one you helped propagate and nurture.
It's one that I got to admit I've been thrilled to see come to fruition. I never thought it would happen. I'm really excited to get to talk to our guest.
Well, our guest is Mr. Steve Hustad from Minnesota, and he's probably most known for his historic photograph-based 72nd scale aircraft dioramas. So let's just get into that right now, Dave. Dave, for our special segment this episode, we've got someone here tonight that you're a big fan of, Mr. Steve Hustad from Minnesota. And I bet it's sure cold up there tonight.
Yeah, so right now it's actually the warm day sandwiched between a few cold ones. So it's about 30 degrees right now, but tomorrow's high is going to be like 12. So
there we go. Well, it's warm down here as well. We had about almost 60 degrees today.
Yeah, we're kind of in the opposite situation. We get a cold day every once in a while, sandwiched between the warm ones. So
okay,
we've come off our cold one, which was yesterday, and now today and tomorrow are both 60 degree plus.
Well, that sounds like more fun. But...
Yes.
Well, Steve, we're both admirers of your work, and I know Dave in particular is. He set this one up, so I'm going to let Dave drive. So I'm going to let him handle this. So, Dave, take it away, sir.
You got it. This is actually pretty much the first time that I've ever spoken with our guest. I actually did exchange 1 or 2 brief sentences with him at a national convention that he doesn't remember, and there's no reason he should. But before we get into that story, Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself and your modeling.
Okay, well, let's see. I live in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, which is a southwest suburb of Minneapolis. I'm 68 and retired now, so my main job is building models now. I'm an architect. Got into it, I think, when I was 5 years old, actually. Built my first model, an old Lindbergh monoplane, which my sister helped me make. And I remember cutting out the decals, and we didn't put them in water. We just cut them out and then glued them with the paper backing onto the model. So that was my first recollection. But I was hooked from that single kit early on. So retired a few years ago. Main areas of modeling interest lately have been pretty much all 72nd scale aircraft dioramas for the last few years, interspersed with some 72nd scale Japanese World War II and 72nd scale armor modeling.
I have numerous questions.
Okay.
And you're going to have to help me with dates here because I may get these out of order. I first saw one of your models, I think it was the 2005 IPMS USA Nationals in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was a JU 188, 72nd scale JU 188 crashed in water diorama. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's one of my early ones, the old Italerary kit,
Yeah.
titled "Stranded in California." I think it was off the coast of Greece somewhere, where this crew was shot down by a British, I think Spitfire or boat fighter. I can't remember now, but they were stranded on this island for like a couple of weeks before they were rescued by a DO-24 or an HE-115. But while they were there, they took a series of photos, and that's what I used to model the diorama from, is the photos they took while they were waiting to be rescued. So,
and that's the amazing thing. Mike and I have commented previously, because Mike is an armor modeler with a particular interest in Soviet World War II armor. And one of the things he does is he watches German eBay for all of these old World War II photographs. And he's commented on the fact that German soldiers were equipped with, many of them took their personal cameras and took lots of pictures.
mm-hmm.
And this particular diorama that I'm describing, it blew my mind, because it's just unbelievable that you took a series of pictures that these guys took standing on the top of their airplane, which is half submerged in water. And you actually managed to recreate the diorama using those photos, where you even have the photographer in the proper place to get the perspective of the photograph that you featured behind the diorama.
Yeah, that was a fun one. And all my dioramas are done from veterans' photographs. Not always U.S. veterans, but usually. But yeah, that's kind of a fun way to do it. And there were actually several photos taken from several different angles of that scene. And I kind of model it usually based on one, but the other photos kind of help you fill out the scene and get everything else right. So,
well, and what really caught my eye about that model is that I have a contention that 72nd scale aircraft dioramas may be the hardest thing to pull off and make look right, make look good. Just simply the small scale makes it difficult to make it not look toy-like. And this diorama that we're talking about, and we'll put pictures of it up, certainly don't look toy-like. It is just really very realistic, and obviously the photos help that. But that took guts to do. What made you think you could pull that off?
Well, I had the kit and I had the materials and I just had the time. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, nobody has to see it. so I took a run at it and it worked. And I think you're right. The 72nd scale, a lot of people kind of diminish 72nd scale, but that's my primary scale, and it's the scale I like to work in, because sometimes it's difficult to get things in scale and to look good. And I think when you do, I think it's that much more impressive, and that's why I like to work in 72nd scale, because it's kind of more of a challenge. The camouflaging is more of a challenge. The scale finesse is more of a challenge, and replicating the figures, getting the faces and everything just to scale. Getting things to scale is just more of a challenge. So, and I like a challenge with these dioramas. So,
well, that was certainly a challenge. Now, did you have your JU-88 is beautiful. JU-188 is beautiful. Mm-hmm. Did you have any hesitation about submerging it in whatever? Was it a resin that you used? What did you use to simulate the water? Because it comes out really, really nicely.
Oh, thanks. That's actually almost about a third of my modeling time is experimenting. So I bought this material called Envirotex Light. I think I picked it up at Michael's, and it's a 2-part resin material. And it's actually made for giving a high gloss, thick finish to like tabletops, like bar tops.
Gotcha.
And it's supposed to be put on like 1/8-inch layers. So I got this stuff, mixed it up, and experimented with it to make sure it wouldn't attack plastic or paint, which it turned out it doesn't. So then just kind of layer it up in like 1/8-inch, 3/16-inch layers and kind of build it up. And then the top layer, the stuff dries just mirror flat though, which is a problem. So to get the kind of the waves and the ripples and things, I take this Liquitex heavy gel medium, which is an acrylic product.
Yeah.
And I kind of put that on the top, and you can kind of sculpt that into the waves and the ripples, and then that dries perfectly clear too. And on top of that, you can go back with more of the Liquitex heavy gel medium with a little bit of acrylic flat white added to it, just a little bit to tint it, where it kind of splashes up against the airframe and causes, kind of a foamy look.
Yeah.
And you can kind of apply that too. And so that's the way you get that. And it's really controllable. So it's really not as hard as it looks. It just kind of takes time. And then when that's all settled and when that's all dried, then I just kind of brush on a really heavy coat of high gloss future, and then that's done.
Well, this is the National where I actually saw you and spoke to you the one and only time before tonight, because at IPMS Nationals, one thing they do that I really like is with the entry form, it's folded under where if you're interested, you can lift up the entry form and you can see the name of the builder.
Oh, right.
And because a lot of times you see a builder and you see they've done something and you want to go ask them, how did you pull this off? What technique did you use? Did you find this kit particularly difficult? Is there anything I should look out for? But I looked, and that's where I saw your name. And then when everybody was picking up their models, I didn't have a model entered there because I had just come back from China after adopting my first daughter.
Oh, wow.
The fact that my wife let me go to the IPMS Nationals less than 30 days after returning from China with the woman's a saint.
This was probably an infant you brought home too, right?
She's probably in shock.
14 months old. Yeah, maybe
okay.
so. Hey, it worked. It happened. I'm not going to question my good fortune.
Yep.
But after the award ceremony, I stood back by that model because I wanted to see the person who built it. And you came to pick up your model, and I just simply said, nice model. And you said, thank you very much. And that was the entire interaction.
Oh, okay.
But then the next year was Kansas City. And I'm in Kansas City, 2006. I think your entry that year was a JU-52 that was crashed.
Oh, on the hillside, kind of a winter camouflage.
Yes.
And it was kind of springtime, so there was like some melting snow. And
yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that was fun to do.
I think that was Kansas City.
Yep.
So I'm like, oh, and to be honest with you, as soon as I saw it, I knew who had to build it, because a lot of modelers have a style. And once you've seen one or two of their models, you're like, oh, okay, I recognize that. So there are not that many people who pull off 72nd scale aircraft dioramas that well anyway. And so I was like, oh, well, he's here. That's fantastic. I got to enjoy that model. And then I'm walking around the rest of the display area, and we're in the dioramas and vignettes.
Mm.
And one area of interest for me outside of 72nd scale aircraft is World War I stuff. Not World War I airplanes, because I am not going to build a biplane in 72nd scale, at least a World War I biplane. But so I'm walking around the vignettes, and there is this really fantastic small World War I German machine gun nest. And really just beautifully composed. Really, the figures were done well. The groundwork was done well. And so naturally, I lifted up the thing and looked to see who had done it. And it was you.
Oh, I was going to say mine was sitting next to it, I think.
No. It was like, damn, this is not fair that he can do this too.
Oh yeah, that was another area of my interest. 35th scale World War One figure dioramas.
And oh my gosh, again, we'll put a picture up of it because I took a bunch of pictures. That it was absolutely gorgeous.
Oh,
I mean,
thanks.
you really did. One of the things that I think is tough to do with a vignette or a small diorama is to convey action, to make it look like it's not a posed painting or photograph, but it is a snapshot of something that's happening continuously.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just looking at the single frame from that action.
Yeah, well,
And-
my kind of hero is Bill Horan, who does figure dioramas. He's the absolute best, and that's where I get my inspiration from for figure dioramas. Yeah.
Well, let's go back just a minute, Dave, if you let me get a question in.
Absolutely.
Steve, the diorama with the airplane in the water is not your only one in the water.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to have a penchant for doing those. I think maybe we'll get into it maybe a little later, but you did a series of Battle of Britain dioramas, I believe.
Oh yeah, last year.
Okay. Are you using the same material for your water time and again? But you said you spend a lot of time, a third of your time experimenting.
Right.
Are you using different things? What else? Because I've never done a water one, and I've got a kind of a soft spot for 72nd scale float planes, and I got a feeling that I'm going to have a water.
It's coming.
A water experience is coming.
Well, Mike, did you get that Paul finished yet?
No, it's on the back burner until I get something else done. But
okay. Yeah, it's the same as far as the water. I've been using the same Envirotex light for all my water after I finally figured out that it doesn't wreck the model or wreck the paint. So I figured, well, this works pretty well, and then so I've kind of settled on that for my technique for water. Although I do want to experiment with something that has more undulating water, where it's like really high waves and deep gullies, and I'm going to have to figure out something different for that because I've got an idea for a Arado AR-196 diorama where it's kind of about to be capsized at sea and they're trying to get into a boat and it's just roiling around them. But so I might have to figure out something different for that. But
Steve, you're speaking his language right now. The Arado 196 is one of Mike's sweet spots.
It is a cool plane.
I think it's probably when I think of a float plane, that's the one that comes to mind every single time.
Yeah, I just wish we had a better one in 72nd. But
which one are you planning on? The old Heller? Or
yeah, I'm going to use. I think was it Sword came out with one,
yes.
But I can't find it anywhere. And the old Heller one with the Edward photo etch and the Falcon vat canopy, and there's some quick boost for it too. I think it'll turn out pretty well. So I'm going to use that one. So
Mike mentioned that you just did a series of Battle of Britain dioramas, but let's expand on what those were, because again, they are really great 72nd scale aircraft dioramas. They're all done from either a photograph or a series of photographs, correct?
That's right.
And they were basically German aircraft. Were they all 109s?
Yep, they're all 109Es, and they're all in some form of crashed. But I was looking through some books, and of course I get my inspiration from the photos in the books, and I wanted to do a 109E Battle of Britain diorama with. Then I came across one. I put a post-it on that page and thought, yeah, I want to do that one. And a few pages later, there's another one. I'd like to do that one too. And a few pages more, I'd like to do that one too. And pretty soon, I just figured out, well, I'm going to do all four. So I got I worked on two at a time. I always build models two at a time, dioramas two at a time.
Really?
Yeah. And so I did the one with the sheep herder and the sheep on it first, along with the one where the 109's dismantled on the truck bed and it's being hauled off to the scrap heap. So I built those two at the same time. And
first of all, which 109 kit did you use?
I used two different ones. That's before the special hobby kit came out.
Right.
Which is by and large the best that I've ever seen for a 109E. But I used for the one with the sheep and the diorama, I used the Tamiya 109E, but I used the ICM fuselage.
Gotcha.
because the fuselage has the correct length and the Tamiya is a little short. Although when you put it together, you really can't tell, so I probably didn't really need to. And the other one is the newer Airfix 109E, the one that's dismantled on the truck bed, and had to cut that apart and get the wings, kind of put by it. And then the two dioramas I did after that, one was, I called it, it's a horsepower and manpower, and there's a team of horses that's pulling this 109, but there's a lot of RAF personnel pushing it from behind, but they're just posing for a photo. That one was another Airfix kit, and the other one, the fourth one, the one that's crashed in the water, it's a plane that made it back to the French coast, but not quite to the airfield and ditched in the water. And that's it's got a bare-chested guy looking in the cockpit, and that one's also the Airfix kit. So I use those two for those. And actually, I've got a couple ideas for a couple more Battle of Britain 109E dioramas, but not quite yet. But
now, speaking of which, you talk about those dioramas. The kit obviously is available, but a lot of the other stuff in the photographs aren't necessarily available.
Right.
Like for the one with the truck, where did you get the truck?
The truck is the truck is about 80% scratch built.
Okay.
And the chassis is from the chassis and the wheels came from some Eastern European Gaz fire truck or something. Gotcha. So I bought that, and it's for the chassis and the wheels, and then that part of the cab I used too. But it's from photos again. I would carve it up and chop it apart, and used a lot of evergreen and plastistrut sheet strip and rod, and just kind of built that up to match the photos. So
first of all, where do you find 72nd scale sheep?
Those are scratch built.
Scratch built sheep.
Yeah, I did I made three. I made a wire armature, and then used some epoxy sculpt, and then made these sheep. I made three sheeps, one bigger and two smaller, and then with different heads and different angles. And had a friend of mine, Bob Ferrara here, who used to cast for role models when they did Loon Models resin. So I had him cast me up 10 copies of each, and then I got those, and then I'd modify them a little more, and so that's where those came from. So,
well, what I like about that diorama is I don't know why, but I've seen it on a video, a movie, or something on television where you see these herds of sheep moving, and they're all so tightly packed together.
Yeah, it was a common scene in England, and I saw that photo, and I didn't know how I was going to do the sheep, and I looked around, and Prizer didn't have them, and I think they do now actually, but nobody made sheep in 72nd scale, and I thought, well, that can't be that tough. So, and I've done a lot of scratch building with putties, so I thought, well, I'll work them up, and Bob cast me up some copies, and so it worked out fine.
Well, I think a lot of people would have just stuck sheep everywhere, but the way of course, you say you had a photograph, but
right,
the realism of the way the sheep are all packed together and moving as this tightly packed herd, it just really the realism there was just incredible. I really liked that one a lot.
Oh, thanks. I got a lot of ribbing from my friends about that one too. So,
do you ever do an aircraft diorama without an actual photograph?
So far, I haven't. I've done 26 aircraft dioramas so far, but they've all been done by photos. But the one I just described that I want to do with the AR-196, of course, they're out at sea and they're about to be ditched. That one that's kind of just out of my imagination. So that's not a photo, but that has yet to be done.
Other than the Arado, is there another set of photographs that you've basically been looking at and thinking, okay, when I'm done with the 109s, I'm looking at doing this?
Yeah, I've got, I think as modelers, we all kind of have big libraries, and we're always looking through books, and I've got a packet of Post-it notes that I keep, and a pen, and when I see something that might make a good diorama, I'll write on the Post-it note and slap it on so it's sticking up above the page so I can come back to it later. And looking at my library now, it's like you look at the books and they've got like hundreds of these Post-it notes sticking up, and I have to live 100 more years before I get half of those. So
My wife accuses me of being a librarian that collects models rather than a
Oh,
modeler that collects reference.
yeah. And I've found one thing is when I'm reading a book, I always want to build what I'm reading.
Yeah.
So I've decided now I try and limit myself to reading only about what I'm currently building, so I don't stray.
Yeah. So you say you have 2 dioramas going at any one time?
Yeah.
Is there a reason for that?
Well, yeah. I usually, basically, I'm lazy, so I like to, I like to I like to combine my painting sessions. So I spray the same colors at the same time on the 2 different models.
Gotcha.
So the ones I just finished, for example, were a pair of J88s. One was a J88A4 at the end of the war that's kind of blown up in pieces and it's scattered about, but there's some GIs posing on it for a photo to send home. And the other one is a J88A5 that ditched in the water just off the shore of Britain in May of 41. But they both have 70, 71, 65 camouflage. So I thought, well, I want to do both of these and I can combine the painting for both. So it's usually, I'll pick 2 subjects that require very similar paint schemes and or similar models, like the 109Es, the Battle of Britain dioramas. I can build 2 cockpits at the same time. I can build 2 sets of landing gear, and it just makes things more efficient and quicker. And
what's your process and technique for groundwork? Because again, that's where I think most 72nd scale dioramas fail, is that in 72nd scale, the groundwork doesn't tend to look, for want of a better term, realistic. It looks either toy-like or over-exaggerated, and you've, now maybe it's because you work from photographs, so you know what you're trying to model an actual scene, but it seems like your groundwork comes off really, really well. And I'm wondering if there's any particular insight you've got into that.
Well, thanks. I got most of the groundwork I started with, of course, Shep Payne's How to Build Dioramas book, and his, like we all did back then, is like his descriptions of how he would approach groundwork, and the idea that your groundwork, you should put as much effort into the making it as real as the model itself that it has a backdrop for. And I think that's the mistake a lot of modelers do, is the groundwork is an afterthought, and they kind of rush through it, and sometimes it's maybe more than they can chew, or it's too big. You have a model in a big scene and it's a lot of time. But just treat the groundwork just like you treat the model. It's just treat it like you want to get the details right, and just take your time with it. And like the 2 J88 dioramas I was doing, they're both done now, but the main challenges on those, one was trees. Trees is a big challenge, and this has a backdrop of these tall deciduous trees. So that was kind of getting them, but it took a long time to experiment with how to get the trees to look right. And again, like a third of my time is almost spent just experimenting and trying techniques, painting or building, or trees in that case. So, but yeah, it's just treat the groundwork like you treat the model, and just put as much effort and time, and don't let it take second stage to the model itself. So that's kind of the technique I use.
So what technique did you finally settle on for the trees?
Well, I went to Michael's, and they have a kind of a floral department there, which these kind of dried flowers and things. And I looked for something that was close to the scale I wanted, with the kind of branch arrangements and things. So I found something close. I bought that, and of course I'm standing behind all the blue hairs in line, and with my floral arrangements, and so I get it home, and I get a kind of a askance look from my wife when I bring it in the door, but that's all right. And but I chopped it up and then took off the foliage on it, because that was way out of scale, and just left with the branches. And then I would take branches off other ones and kind of glue them in, so I get more of a dense branch arrangement. And then I would take a lot of herbs and things like oregano and other crumbled dry flowers and things, and get a dish of diluted white glue, and kind of dip the branches in there, and then dip it into the oregano and the rest of it, and kind of do that over and over, and you kind of build it up that way. And then the last technique I used on this one was to take some of that ground foam, and you can again take it and dip it into the diluted white glue, and then put the foam on top of that, and and then once they're settled and you're kind of happy with the way they look, then you'd airbrush them from below with a very, very black green, and from above with a lighter greens, and kind of build it up that way, and the trunks with the grays and things. So, but it took a while to kind of figure out how to get them to look halfway decent. So I can send you some photos of those too. But
I'd like to see them. You said you've done 26 different aircraft dioramas. First of all, I'm impressed that you know that number off the top of your head. Do you have a favorite? One that you thought came out particularly well?
Yeah, I got several favorites, and then some that I think are, they're okay. But I do like the JU-52 one you mentioned, and I did another one that I got out of. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Luftwaffe in Focus series.
Oh, yeah,
German language, and there was an HE-111 that had kind of bellied in behind Russian lines, and they'd gotten out, and then they set fire to it afterward. But there's a series of photos that kind of document that. I did that one, and I kind of like that one too, because I got to experiment with some chipping fluid and temporary white camouflage and the weathering and all that. It was kind of fun. So
I don't think I've ever seen that one. I'll have to see it.
Yeah, I can send you photos of that too if you want. So
now, you mentioned an interest in 72nd scale armor. Mm-hmm. Have you ever done a diorama, a vehicle diorama, rather than an aircraft-centered diorama?
No, I didn't, but I did. I think I brought it to Omaha, and I think it was 2017. I did a 72nd scale trench battle diorama, but it was with the French and Germans. Yeah.
Okay, I was at Omaha. I don't remember that. Maybe I missed it. I'll have to go back and look through my photographs, because I try and photograph nearly everything. So,
Oh, I was going to say I do. I just finished a German, was it World War I A7V in 72nd from that horrible old MHAR kit, and Tigers and Panthers, and I've done another one. What was the other? Opel Blitz in the winter, being pushed out of the mud. 72nd, that was another one. I think I brought that to Omaha too. But
well, that raises another question for me that I'm meant to mention. Your figures, where do you get? 72nd scale figures are notoriously
awful.
Well, okay, all right. I was reaching for something diplomatic. Yeah, let's be honest here. Awful.
I think the raw material that we have to work with is awful. I mean, I've seen a lot of modelers do great jobs with it, but nobody makes it 35th scale or 32nd scale, there's just the selections are endless and they're really excellent. But you get down to 72nd scale and they all look like hobbits. I mean, they've got really strange anatomy, and they've got these short legs and these long torsos. And so early on, I figured, well, I got to pose these guys to match the people in the photographs. So I wanted something that was hard plastic and something that came with maybe the pieces already separate, like the arms and the torsos and the heads and the legs. So I settled on Prizer. Makes some really excellent and very anatomically correct figures in 72nd scale, although I'm not sure if Prizer is still producing, because they seem to have fallen off the face of the earth lately. But so I use those torsos and those heads, and I'll put them together and pose them and insert wedges and cut arms and reposition them. And then once I get the pose that matches the photo, then I'll take the epoxy sculpt, that 2-part epoxy material, and you can kind of infill and strengthen, and then you can use that also to kind of layer on uniform details but the Prizer has really good faces and really good anatomy, so that's the starting point I use.
Well, they come out really well. Yeah, I agree with you. In general, 72nd scale figures, they're either anemically thin or cartoonishly thick, and it just ruins the proportion. So even if you do a really good job with the figure, You put it next to the aircraft or the piece of armor or whatever, and it ends up detracting from the overall presentation simply because it looks, for want of a better term, silly.
Right. That kind of goes back to what I was saying before, is like when you have three components of a diorama, you've usually got the subject model itself, and then you've got the groundwork, and then you've got the figures that support it all. And those three things, I think you have to pay attention to all three to the same extent.
Well, we've talked about that before, Dave. And then, this 35th scale, this anti-tank gun I'm working on, back to something you said earlier, is, and from the Shep Payne book, as you mentioned, is you need to at least attempt to put the same amount of time and effort into those other things as the model, else it's just going to come up short. And that's a lot of work. If you put a lot of time into the model, sometimes I think that's where a lot of things fall apart for a lot of modelers, is that they get to a point where they're done mentally, probably, and they've got this display, this last hurdle to get across, and they just kind of phone it in, if you will.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. I've seen a lot of really excellent models on bases that kind of detract from the excellent model.
Yeah, I agree. And you'd almost better leaving it off and just displaying the model on a straight black base or a mirror or whatever, because if you don't have that follow through, and I'm guilty of that myself, that it really lessens it. One other area where your models stand out to me is you have done any number of battle damaged aircraft. And that's another thing, like 72nd scale groundwork, that I think is hard to pull off well. Have it not look cartoonish, like the old ICM kit, the old ICM battle damage kit.
Oh, sure.
You remember those.
The jets, yeah.
Yeah. But now, obviously, photo reference is part of it for you. Do you actually go and look at the structure, the internal structure of the prototype aircraft?
Well, I do. If I have to open it up and expose something, I've got enough reference material that I can see what the internal structure is, like like a lot of the what is those Alliant publications, or but something that shows the internal structure. And so yeah, you can go with that. But the battle damage is still something I think I need to improve on, and I'm still working on that. I've got a few ideas for other ones I want to do, but
all right, just if it's not telling secrets out of school, what are a couple of ideas you've got? I'm interested. You got me hooked.
Oh, well, it's sometimes I see some Japanese aircraft. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Meatballs and Dead Birds.
From where I'm sitting, I can take one step, reach back, and I would have that book in my hand. It's in my Japan section of the library.
What a great book that is.
Oh, although if you look, I'm a huge World War II Japanese aircraft fan, and those are some of the saddest pictures.
Oh,
just from the standpoint, you look at how many of them that there is no existing prototype aircraft anywhere in the world.
Oh, you see all these Nels just bulldozed together and burned, and it's just oh, yeah. But there's a lot of photos in there I would like to do, but the battle damage on them, or just the damage from being neglected or blown up or what. Sometimes it's when I pick a blown up subject, I always pick one that I think I can model without too much difficulty. But there's some that I really want to do that are just really extensive damage, and I think it would turn out to be more battle damage than model sometimes. But
Gotcha.
There's some great photos in that book that I'd really like to dive into sometime.
Yeah, I think listen, I think if you could pull, and if there is anybody around who could do it, you could pull off a diorama of one of those. And there are similar photographs at the end of World War II in Germany of these pushed together piles of, and you're almost looking at the photograph trying to pick out exactly what aircraft, all of them that you can see.
Right.
And sometimes it's really surprising. You catch something in there that's Like, that isn't a common item.
Really rare, yeah.
Yes.
And here they're just burning it or something.
Yeah.
But
Again, tears at your tears at your heart just from wishing that we had a prototype of one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So let me go back. Just you mentioned offhand that you have the interest in World War One, and I've seen your World War One work, or at least the 35th scale World War One work. Do you almost exclusively do figures, or do you do much in the way? I know you said you did the German A7V. Do you do much with artillery? Do you do much in 35th scale World War One stuff, or is that
not so much anymore? I think the last 35th scale World War One figures I did was probably 10 or 12 years ago, and now my World War One modeling is pretty much confined to 72nd scale aircraft, and I'm working on a pair right now. One's a vacuform, which is
that's another episode.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it just the hardest part is getting started, but just cutting those pieces out and getting the trailing edges on the wings just started just takes a lot of willpower. But that one, and then a Rodin Albatross W4 and a Sierra scale Hansa Brandenburg C1. It's a 2-seater, but I just got an itch to build those, and I thought, well, why not? I'll do that. After the J88 dioramas, I thought I'd tackle those. But now this new IBG 72nd scale 190 D9 kit comes out.
Oh my gosh.
And I ordered 4 of those things, and I want to build that now too. So
did you see they just announced a double kit?
Oh, I didn't see the double kit. I saw they're going to do a few others with the same tools, but
yeah, I can't wait I'm about to get my hands on one of them. If what I have seen on 72nd scale aircraft forum is any indication, these things are a generational step up in 72nd scale aircraft.
Oh, they're so nice looking. It's just, it's.
And who doesn't love a 190D? They're very attractive aircraft.
Yeah, we needed one for a long time, and
desperately.
So I got 4 of them.
So 4. Well, it's funny you mentioned Sierra Scale. Sierra Scale was made here in Louisville. The guy was a member of our club for years and years.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I met him at one of the nationals once. A real nice guy, and
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and I think he stopped doing them a number of years ago, but I'm not sure. But I am a 72nd scale fan. If you listen to the podcast, you will hear me refer to it as God's one true scale.
Mm-hmm.
But I am also here to admit that World War I aircraft ought to be done in 32nd scale, because I don't see how people model 72nd scale World War I aircraft. I mean, that to me is just beyond comprehension.
Well, it's really a shame that Wingnuts has gone by the wayside too. And
yeah,
I'd listen to the on the bench guys. I listened to Dave, Ian, and Julian all the time too, and it was almost painful to listen to those guys when Wingnuts went under, and because you could hear the despair in their voices, and just
absolutely. Although there is some things seem to be kicking around in China, which make me wonder whether or not, either voluntarily or not, we may see other of that stuff leak out one way or another. I'll be interested to see how that develops.
Yeah, well, it's not my scale, but I sure hope they do.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Dave, Ian, and Julian, they're going to be in Omaha. Are you?
Yeah, I'll be there, and I hope to see you guys and them. I've really enjoyed all the podcasts. Those are the 2 I've listened to, is you guys and on the bench. And
yeah,
so.
Well, we definitely are looking forward to Omaha, and can't wait to see what you bring. Can't wait to actually talk with you in person, other than to say, "Hey, I really like your model."
Yeah,
you probably say that too.
I probably am going to say that too, but
one of your Mojo podcasts that I actually enjoyed the most is when I think Mike was talking to the author of that T-34 book, the new one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
T-34 shock.
Yeah, it's not a subject I'm into, but it almost made me want to build T-34s. It was such a good exchange between you guys. It was a lot of fun to listen to that one.
Yeah, if you get Mike talking about T-34s, I'm telling you, first of all, you're going to learn a whole lot, and especially talking to somebody like that, those two authors obviously also had a love. But I actually have a 72nd scale T-34-85, about 75% done. So
Ooh,
yeah, I
okay.
know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, you're getting advice from Mike on that, I hope, right?
Yeah, his advice is stop dinking around and build it.
No, I don't ever give that advice. I dink around plenty.
Did you ever find a proper catapult for your Paul?
I don't think there is one.
Oh,
So we're just going to have to ignore that for this. For my first catapult, we're just going to have to take what we got.
Nobody's going to know. Just go with it.
Yeah. But my Arado 196 is going to be on a catapult, on a turret.
Oh, okay.
So I got that one to work through.
Which kit are you using for that one?
I've got the Heller kit in the stash, and I've got a sword kit in the stash too. So,
okay, great. Seen a lot of these 72nd scale battleship turrets and cruiser turrets coming out. That looks like a lot of fun.
Well, we'll see if it's a lot of fun. So,
and not only that, but Mike is, as you know, engineer by trade, and he's playing around with 3D printing a lot. So yeah. I expect at some point he's going to start 3D printing catapults.
Well, why not? That's, I've got a Japanese, what is it, E14Y Glen?
Yes.
And that's a Fujimi kit that comes with a catapult.
Yes.
It's probably not the one you're looking for, though.
No, I think that's the same catapult they put with all their kits.
Yeah.
It's a fair representation of an earlier catapult that plane probably was launched from. Oh. I guess with my project, the ships that were converted to the hybrid carrier battleship configuration, when they were battleships, they had that catapult on them. But when they refitted the ships to handle the E-16s and some other planes, they put a new catapult on it, and there's just no documentation.
Yeah, I think I heard you mention that it's a later war plane. Of course, the Paul is, and it was only used on one ship or something. Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes it harder.
Well, I don't know why you get back to all those photographs of all the Japanese planes pushed up in piles and burned. I don't know if the versus the technology that was coming out of the Luftwaffe at the time, if it was just behind the times by that stage of the war, and the planes were of little interest to the Allies fundamentally, and also the logistics of getting those back from that theater of the war versus the European theater of war and all the other commitments those ships had, because it was such a much greater distance that it just wasn't something they did, and a lot of stuff was lost.
I think you're right, and we were pushing our own planes off of carrier decks because we didn't want to bring them back.
Yep, there are a couple of Pacific Islands that you can do excellent dives now and find all sorts of stuff that just got pushed off because it wasn't worth bringing back, even though it was relatively new.
Yeah, that's another some photos my dad took. He was a radar operator on Guam in 44 and 45. He operated a radar site that guided crippled bombers back from Japan.
Yeah.
But he took a lot of photos, and he's got a series of photos of these Japanese midget submarines that they had mounted up on shore. So I might want to do one of those sometime too.
Oh, I would love to see those, because the Japanese midget subs, the Type A's and the Kitons, are one of my areas of interest. I've built the Kiton from the fine molds kit, and I would like to do the Type A.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, what's on the bench right now that's close to the finish line?
Well, I've got two. I'm in the painting right now. The Sierra Scale Hansa Brandenburg C1 and the Rodin Elytros W4. And I'm experimenting with some different clear linen techniques. I want to because both have clear linen wings and wood fuselages. So I want to kind of experiment with different ways to do the wood grains and different ways to do the clear linen wings, where you can it's just kind of showing through from above a little bit.
Right.
I want to experiment with something like that.
So, are you familiar with a guy who's also an architect, by the way, named Mark Smith out of Cleveland or Akron, Ohio?
I don't think so, though.
He did a 48th or 32nd scale Taub, and he did one other World War I aircraft where he did exactly that technique, where he painted and made it look like linen that you could see through, and you could see the markings that had been painted on the underside of the wing below it.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And he did, it's just amazing modeling. And again, I said architects, I think, like Mike and engineers have a special affinity to modeling because they're so detail oriented.
Yeah, it's called anal retentiveness. That's
well, I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, okay, I understand.
Or obsessive compulsive disorder. That's what, so,
or a combination.
Well, there's the old Renwall arrow skin.
Oh God. Oh boy. Oh, a shudder. I remember those too when they were on the shelf back when even drugstores used to sell kits.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Great box art.
Yeah. Oh, they were. Yeah.
Well, great box too, because those things weren't in a rectangular. Well, they had a wedge shaped side on them, didn't they?
They did. Yeah. Oddly enough.
Well, Steve, I've got to say, actually getting to talk to you has been really enjoyable. I got to say, I will tell you that I wanted to hate you when especially after I saw that German machine gun diorama. It's like nobody should be this talented at this wide a cross section of modeling. So there was a part of me that hoped that you were a really bad guy, so that at least I could say, well, fine, at least I could get it. But like almost every really, really good modeler I know, you're a really nice person, really willing to share what they know and what they've learned. And that is one of the things that I really have encountered in the hobby, is generally people who are really, really good at it are also, despite my occasional hope otherwise, really, really nice people.
Well, that's been my experience too. Is it's a terrific hobby, and my best friends I've met in the hobby, and the guy that was kind of pushing me toward you, Mark Copeland's a good friend of mine, and he's the president of our local IPMS club here. It's Twin City Aero Historians, and it's such a great hobby, and I've met so many good people, and I want to thank you guys too for putting together such a great podcast. It's gone so many episodes now, and it's been a lot of fun to listen to all the way through.
Well, good. I'm glad you enjoy it. We listen. If Mike hadn't encouraged me to do this, then I wouldn't have ever gotten to actually talk to you and actually share this information. And I'll tell you, your models are ones that every time I've seen them at shows, and now thanks to social media online, I've always found inspiring. So it's nice to actually stop and talk with you.
Okay. Well, thanks. That's nice of you to say that.
And I've got some tips too, because I've got my little float plane thing going on, but it is 72nd scale.
Attaboy.
And I'm probably gonna stay there, because it just gets, as an engineer, the detail gets more involved as you get bigger, and you know where that goes.
Oh yeah.
I already have trouble finishing, but
now is the Paul done? I mean, except for the catapult.
To report on that in this part of the show, I guess the aircraft is mostly assembled and primed, so it's near paint stage. The catapult's assembled about 70%. No, it's more than that. Probably 85-90%. I've left a side off of it so I can rig the pulley system before I close it all up and paint it. So it won't take that long, I don't think, to finish that one up once I get it. But, I'm learning. I haven't built an aircraft in a long, long time. That's the first one in decades really for me. But
no, I've got that kit too, and I've pulled it out every now and then, but I don't know how to tackle those perforated
Air brakes.
Yeah, the air brakes. How'd you handle that?
Mike, tell him.
I photo etched those myself.
You did?
I did. So let me find the artwork and fire up my ferric chloride bath, and maybe come Omaha, I'll have some for you, and you can get on down that road a little ways, because that's really the only way to do it.
It is. Well, you did it right. Yeah.
Yeah, and if it's one of those things that if you don't do something about that, it just doesn't look right.
Well, that's what I thought, and that's why I was curious how you handled that, and it sounds like you did it right. So,
you saw the same thing I did. Every photograph you see of those things, you can see daylight through those things.
That's right.
Yeah.
I wish I knew how they opened. I have an engineering hunch as how they did that, but I don't really know. But I bet that was something to see with those things butterflied out.
There'll be a big reference come out on that just as soon as you finish the model. So
that's absolutely true.
I don't know. I think that's one of those planes that's lost to time.
Oh, it is. But some Japanese aircraft, World War II aircraft mechanic will have photographs that are stuck in a trunk somewhere, and he'll pass away, and his family will find them and publish them immediately after you finish the model. That's the way it works.
Well, Dave, I think we're going to have some gin at the Mojo Dojo
I think so.
In Omaha, just to get Steve to stop by the room one evening and continue this conversation.
Oh, I'd certainly love that. Yeah.
I can promise him if he stops by the Mojo Dojo, we'll have a martini for him. Are you an olive guy, an onion guy, and what's your take on vermouth?
Usually martini, not Rossi dry vermouth, but we usually use either olives or pickled mushrooms. We like too; those are good.
Oh, cool! And dirty or clean?
Either way, I'm not picky, especially when you get to the second or third one. It doesn't matter.
Mike, I think Steve's going to fit in.
Shaken or stirred?
Well, I do them on the rocks, so I'm not
Okay.
My wife doesn't she does a straight up one. I do them on the rocks, so I'm not pure.
Gotcha.
Well, Steve, thank you for agreeing to come on the show, and we've had a real good time talking to you, and look forward to meeting you face to face in Omaha, because all your dioramas are incredible, given the scale, especially, and because I'm dabbling in that scale as well, and have some interest in incorporating figures into what I'm doing in that scale. Maybe not full blown dioramas, but certainly pilot and a crewman on a catapult would not be an unusual situation, just to show the scale of the thing.
Oh yeah.
Got a lot of questions, more questions I'm sure I'll think of by the time the Nationals rolls around. So thank you again.
Well, you got my contact info, so feel free to contact me with anytime you want.
Dave, you got anything else to say?
Nope, that's it.
Well, Dave, that was a nice conversation with Steve, and I think he's going to be a guest again.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to do it again, because, that was an hour and or 55 minutes, and I didn't begin to scratch the surface of many of the questions that I've got. So, we're definitely going to have to do that again.
Well, that'll be our Steve Hustad primer. And, with my dabbling in 72nd scale aircraft, there's some things in his dioramas that I'm interested in his take on, and his techniques, not just water, but his figures and things like that. So, I guess we'll see him in Omaha.
Yep. We're going to have to sit down and talk to him. And I'm assuming we will see him bring his Battle of Britain 109s dioramas to the show. And I really am looking forward to seeing those in person.
Yeah, me too. That's really impressive stuff. So thanks for Steve for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Hope to do it again. We've gotten to the end of the episode, Mike, so I assume that means that you can see the bottom of your model fluid glass.
Well, I could till I refilled it. Now I'm about halfway there again.
Okay, so. You don't have to reveal all of our secrets when we're recording. So it's a rye. Tell me, what did you think?
It's a rye. It's not a bourbon. It's 90 proof. It's spicy as you expect from a rye.
Yeah.
Which Bullet Bourbon is spicy because it has about the highest amount of rye you can have in the mash bill and still be a bourbon.
Right.
But we're not talking about Bullet. We're talking about this particular rye. Almost like cinnamon, but it just doesn't quite cross that kind of, I don't know what to say. It's not cinnamon, but it's kind of spicy like cinnamon. It's a little hot, but it's got a lot of flavor. And it's got a really leathery nose to it at the front end, even on, well, it's got a leathery nose to it and a little leather on the front end, which I'm starting to like a little bit.
Really?
I think this is good. I think it's better cut with a little water or a little ice than it is neat. That's my opinion. But
Well, I think that's true of most ryes. I'll be honest with you, because my impression of ryes is that they tend to be a little, I don't want to say hotter because they're not any the alcohol content's really not any greater than a lot of bourbons, but they present as hotter. And that might be the spice you're referring to.
It probably is. Again, Last Feather Rye Whiskey from Journeyman Distillery, and Journeyman Distillery is in Three Oaks, Michigan.
All right.
Not bad. Well, how's your beer, Dave?
My beer is not bad. It is not a craft brew. It is not something that I would choose as my everyday go-to beer. But for a mass market beer or relatively mass market, it's a good drink. It's got more body than something like a traditional American Bud, PBR, Miller, etc. But it does still seem watery compared to craft beers. It doesn't have as much body as a craft beer. It's a 4.5% alcohol by volume. So you really don't get the alcohol presentation like you would with a stronger craft beer, but it's relaxing and drinkable. So yeah, definitely drinkable.
In my history, well, my post 21-year-old history, I have been witness to 3 markets where Yuengling was introduced. And the hype is always, oh, we're getting Yuengling. It's so awesome. It's great. Blah, blah, blah. It never lives up to the hype. Never.
Yeah,
it's just not that good.
I would agree. It's not, compared to what we now enjoy from craft beer.
Unremarkable.
You're absolutely correct. Now, if you transport us all back to 1979, 1980, before the craft beer explosion, Yuengling would be a beer that you would much prefer to any of the other readily available American water beers or American rice beers.
I would agree with that, but
it's a victim of the fact that the brewer's art has just blown up since the 1980s. This is the end of the episode, so before we go, do you have any shout-outs?
I do, Dave. I've got some shout-outs. Again, they're the recent additions to the ranks of the contributing to Plastic Model Mojo. We have Mr. Steve Hustad, which may prove that you can actually buy your way onto the podcast.
No.
In addition to Steve, we've got Mike Libero, Matt Dyer, Jeff Keenan, Ed Kawahara, JG Liu, and Rock Rozak over at the Tail and Scale. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for your contributions. It's much appreciated. It all goes, again, a long way to helping us bring you Plastic Model Mojo. And it's setting us up for some changes I keep alluding to, and I'm not quite ready to say just yet, but we're going to move to a new platform, I think, and improve on this show.
Right.
Hopefully markedly, but we'll see.
And by platform, you mean back end. It's not anything.
Oh, it's all back end, yeah.
Right. It's not anything the folks up front will notice other than maybe a more refined and quality product.
Well, I will say, though, it's going to bring us another format opportunity that will be unique. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
That we can't do now with Zencastr.
Gotcha.
If you'd like to contribute to Plastic Model Mojo and would like to do so on a recurring basis, you can go to www.patreon.com/Plastic Model Mojo, and you can set up a recurring contribution on a monthly basis of any amount you care to contribute. And we much appreciate it. It's folks who are willing to contribute is one thing, but those who step up and are willing to sign up for something indefinite every month, it's really humbling. I can't believe it. So thanks a lot, guys. In addition, if you'd like to make a one-time donation or manage your own recurring contribution, you can do that at plasticmodelmojo.com. There's a heart icon in the upper right-hand corner of the screen that will take you directly to a PayPal link, and there you can go there once, twice, as many times as you like, and make a contribution there as well. So, guys, we'll see you in Omaha. We'll thank you in person if we can. Everybody's just so generous. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Not anything that we ever thought would happen when we started doing this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, my shout out is kind of related to our guest tonight. My shout out is to all of the men and women who put on IPMS national conventions, because without people doing that, without people willing to step up, to devote their time to the actual putting on of the show, I wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to meet Steve and see his amazing models. He lives in Minnesota. We don't go to the same model contests as far as regionally. So I would have never been exposed to his work were it not for people stepping up and putting on the national convention. The national convention's a lot of fun. The national convention I love. I've said it's the best 4 days of my year in and year out. And I think it's probably worth taking a moment to appreciate the people who do the hard work of making it happen each year. So thank you. And guys in Omaha, know that we appreciate the work that you're putting in now that we're going to get the benefit of in late July.
Is that the end of your shout outs, Dave?
That's the end of my shout out.
Well, that's the end of our episode too.
All right. We got a good one here. You know what they say, Mike? So many kids.
So little time, Dave. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Enjoy that